When someone begins to move away from us, it is natural for a whirlwind of emotions to invade our interior. We feel as if something is wrong with us, and this sense of loss can be painful. However, Stoicism does not deny pain. It teaches you to face it head-on. The first step is to allow yourself to feel without judgment, without haste. Just recognizing that pain is a natural reaction to an unexpected change. The Stoic does not run away from pain, but neither does he surrender to it. Philosophy teaches us that there is nothing shameful about suffering, as long as we do not become slaves to that suffering. Feeling sadness or frustration does not make us weak, only human. The real strength lies in welcoming these emotions without letting them dictate our actions. Moving away is not always synonymous with rejection. Sometimes the other needs space to deal with their own battles, which often do not even have a direct relationship with us. What we feel in these moments is more about our interpretation of silence than about the intention of the other. Therefore, it is essential to look inward honestly. Stoic practice invites us to observe emotion, not merge with it. When we say, "I'm sad," we're defining ourselves by sadness. But if we say, "I'm feeling sad," we create a healthy distance which allows for clarity. This subtlety completely changes the way we react to being away from someone. Allowing yourself to feel is also an act of courage. Instead of resisting, the Stoic takes a deep breath and contemplates, what does this pain want to teach me? This type of question transforms suffering into wisdom. It's not about romanticizing pain, but about giving it a purpose. Feeling is the beginning of healing. And when we open ourselves to what is happening inside us, we also open space to rebuild. Moving away from the other can be the push that was missing to reconnect with ourselves. And this, within the Stoic philosophy, is the greatest gift that pain can offer us. When we are overwhelmed by emotion, reality is distorted. The mind creates stories, assumptions, and scenarios that don't always match the facts. In Stoicism, we learn that our feelings are fleeting, but what we do with them is what builds our life. Emotion is not reality. It is just the way we interpret what happens around us. For example, being away from someone may seem like a sign of rejection, abandonment, or lack of love. But this is only one perspective among many others. The Stoic avoids labeling situations without understanding the context. He seeks clarity before drawing conclusions. After all, how many times have you felt insecure about something that you later found out wasn't even about you? The secret is to develop an observant eye. Instead of reacting impulsively to what he feels, the practitioner of Stoicism pauses, breathes, and asks, what's really going on here? Is what I'm feeling based on facts or assumptions? This simple habit already changes the way we face difficulties. It is not a matter of ignoring feelings, but of understanding that they are messages, not absolute truths. If you feel fear, you may be projecting a loss scenario. If you feel angry, you may be frustrated with something that didn't turn out as you expected. All of this is valid, but it doesn't have to define who you are, much less your decisions. When we learn to separate emotion from reality, we gain freedom. We stop being slaves to our reactions and start responding more wisely. And what seemed to be the end of the world often turns out to be just a phase, fleeting like all the others. Stoic philosophy teaches that reality is neutral. What gives color to the events are our interpretations. And if we can change our way of seeing, we can change the way we live. The first step is this. Don't believe everything you feel, but listen carefully to what it means. Life is made of ups and downs, and the distance from someone dear can completely throw us off track. But according to Stoic teachings, balance does not come from external stability, but from internal strength. When everything around seems to fall apart, it is within us that we must build our foundation. Stoicism teaches that true stability comes from the ability to govern oneself. This means not relying on the moods of others to keep your peace, nor allowing the winds of life to dictate your direction. Pain exists, but it doesn't have to control you. You can feel it deeply, without losing yourself. It's common after a breakup to desperately try to hold on to something. Answers, reconciliations, explanations. But the Stoic knows that not everything needs to be resolved immediately. Often the wisest thing is to take a step back, breathe and observe. Time reveals truths that anxiety hides. Rebalancing is a process. It starts with small acts, resuming a routine, going back to practicing a hobby, taking care of your body and mind. Every gesture of self-care is a silent declaration that you're still in charge, even when the world seems out of control. The Stoic philosophy does not promise to avoid pain, but it does offer a way to go through it with dignity, and that in itself is already a form of victory. Emotional balance is not achieved by eliminating problems, but by changing the way we relate to them. When you find this point of inner firmness, the distance from the other loses the power to destroy you. You realize that there is still something solid, stable, resistant in you, and this is the beginning of a new construction, not of what has been lost, but of what you can become. One of the biggest mistakes after someone is to leave is to act out of desperation, sending messages, seeking explanations, begging for attention. But Stoicism teaches that true strength lies in the silence that comes from self-control, not indifference. You have to resist the urge to prove something, including yourself. To demonstrate need is to communicate, even without wanting to, that your happiness depends on the other. And this emotional dependence is precisely what Stoicism combats. Philosophy proposes that we be sufficient in ourselves, capable of finding peace even in the face of abandonment. This does not mean being cold or insensitive, but rather maintaining dignity even in pain. When you choose silence, you are choosing not to wallow in impulsive reactions. He is choosing not to transfer his power to those who may have already decided to step aside. Silence is not the absence of feeling, it is the presence of wisdom. It creates space for the other to also reflect. In many cases, this space is what restores respect, admiration, and even interest. After all, emotional force is one of the most powerful forms of magnetism. Standing firm in the face of distancing is a Stoic exercise. It is refusing to be swept away by the storm. It's trusting that you can rebuild yourself without having to explain yourself. This is more than strategy. It's a philosophy of life based on emotional freedom. After all, silence can be a cry of strength. It shows that you respect your own boundaries, even when the other doesn't. And within this posture is one of the greatest Stoic virtues, the courage to remain. Centered when everything around you tries to destabilize you. The core of Stoicism lies in a fundamental distinction, what you can control and what you can't. This understanding changes everything, especially when someone walks away. Instead of trying to convince the other to stay, the Stoic asks, what can I do with what's happening right now? You can't control the feelings, attitudes, or decisions of others. You can't force someone to keep giving you attention or affection, but you can control how you react to it. You can choose whether to sink into despair or use this moment as fuel to grow. Focusing on what is under your control is an act of liberation. It means leaving the position of victim and taking the lead in one's own life. Even if you are hurt, even if you are confused, you can act consciously. You can take care of your well-being, continue with your projects, invest in yourself. When we stop fighting against the uncontrollable, a different peace is born. It's as if, when we let go of the rope, we realized that we were hurting ourselves for nothing. This surrender is not giving up, but maturity. It's understanding that forcing something doesn't bring true love, only frustration. Mastering what you can isn't about having tight control over everything. It's about taking responsibility for your inner world. It's waking up and deciding what you want to nurture, resentment or serenity, attachment or growth, pain or purpose. Moving away from the other can be the push you needed to become more whole, not because loss is good, but because you decide to turn it into learning. And that's the greatest power a Stoic can cultivate, to use every challenge as an opportunity to become better. When someone walks away, the temptation to act out of desperation is almost irresistible. We want to do something, anything, to take back control of the situation. But Stoicism teaches that true mastery comes from calmness, not haste. Acting without balance only distances us even further from who we are. Despair sends a silent message of insecurity. It shows that you are willing to give up your own dignity in exchange for attention. However, the Stoic understands that no relationship is worth the loss of one's essence. Your inner peace should always be your priority. Maintaining emotional dignity is not acting as if nothing matters, but rather as if you know that your peace is more valuable than any forced reconciliation. This conveys strength, self-respect, and confidence. Three elements that often rekindle the admiration of the other, if not, at least, preserve their integrity. Stoic philosophy reminds us that everything that comes from despair is born of fear. Fear of missing out, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. But the Stoic rightly faces fear. He asks, what is really at stake here? And almost always the answer is the image we create, not reality. By choosing not to act impulsively, you give space for the other to breathe and also for yourself to reflect. And in this silence, many times, the transformation resides. You discover that you're stronger than you thought, and that the value of your presence doesn't depend on anyone's approval. Preserving your emotional dignity is, in the end, it's a reminder that regardless of who stays or goes, you'll always have a safe place to come back to, inside you. Loving someone deeply does not mean completely canceling oneself. Often in the desire to keep someone close, we end up forgetting about ourselves. Stoicism warns us about this imbalance, showing that healthy love begins with respect for one's individuality. When we give too much, we cross a subtle boundary between care and dependence. We begin to measure our worth by how much the other responds. However, the Stoic understands that to love is not to lose oneself, it is to share the path without abandoning one's own path. Emotional balance does not require coldness, but awareness. You can show affection, attention, and affection without letting go of your own dreams, hobbies, and goals. In fact, staying true to yourself is one of the most beautiful ways to love. It shows the other that you have something to offer beyond neediness. Suffocation often drives away, not for lack of love, but for excess of control. And true love needs room to breathe. The Stoic knows that trying to trap someone is like squeezing sand between your fingers. The more force, the more you escape. Lightness is often the way back to connection. Therefore, a healthy relationship is built with mutual freedom, where each one grows individually without losing connection. Stoicism teaches us to cultivate bonds without strings attached, with presence, but without possession. A love that respects the other as a free being and not as an extension of oneself. In the end, to love well is to love with quality, not quantity. And this quality begins when you understand that true love does not require sacrificing your identity. On the contrary, it flourishes when you are whole by yourself and invites the other to do the same. Self-sufficiency in Stoicism is not living isolated from the world. It is to be emotionally independent enough not to depend on the behavior of others to feel whole. When someone moves away, it is common to try to fill the void with efforts to reconquer. But perhaps what we need most is to win ourselves back first. Being self-sufficient means nourishing oneself from one's own sources. Turn to your interests, your passions, your friendships. It is to find pleasure in being with oneself, in silence, without fear. The pain of estrangement is real, but it doesn't have to turn into despair. It can be an invitation to reconnect with your essence. In Stoicism, this reconnection begins with self-care. Resume activities that make sense. Invest in your health, your well-being, your learning. Not out of vanity, but out of respect. Because you deserve to be taken care of, especially by yourself. Self-reliance also redefines the value of the relationship. When you're whole, you don't need someone to fill a void. You want someone to share what is already abundant within you. This changes everything. From the way you communicate to the way you donate, this inner strength is not built overnight. It is cultivated with small actions, small conscious choices. Every time you prioritize yourself without guilt, you're nurturing that solid foundation. And over time, it becomes unshakable. Being self-sufficient is the opposite of emotional dependence. It is an invitation to live in a lighter, more centered, more authentic way. And paradoxically, this is what makes us more magnetic. Because nothing attracts more than someone who is okay with themselves. Controlling emotions is not swallowing what you feel, but choosing wisely how to act in the face of what you feel. When someone hurts us or pulls us away, anger, fear, and sadness can become dominant. But Stoicism proposes another route, that of conscious pause. The first step is simple but powerful. Breathe. When we feel a strong emotion, the body reacts. It accelerates the heart, tenses the muscles, clouds the reasoning. But if you take a deep breath, it gives your brain a chance to take back control. And that already changes everything. The Stoic is not immune to emotions, but he has learned not to be overwhelmed by them. He observes what he feels, names the emotion, and only then decides what to do. This practice reduces impulsive attitudes, messages that we later regret having sent, or words that hurt more than they heal. Writing down what you feel is another powerful tool. An emotional journal helps you process what's inside without having to dump it all on the other. It is a space for self-reflection where you can better understand your reactions and learn from them. Over time, you develop a kind of internal compass. Emotions cease to be storms and become signs. And as Stoicism teaches, what hurts us is not the facts, but the way we interpret them. To change the interpretation is to gain freedom. Mastering emotions is a form of wisdom. It does not mean to stop feeling, but to use what you feel as fuel to grow, and not as a chain to imprison yourself. This is the essence of a Stoic spirit, steady, calm, and prepared for any tide. Accepting that someone has moved away is one of the most difficult steps, but also one of the most liberating. In Stoicism, acceptance is not an act of weakness, it is a form of strength. It is looking at reality as it is, without makeup, without illusion. And from that, decide what to do. The mind tries to resist. It seeks reasons, creates hope, projects alternative futures. But all this mental energy exhausts us. To accept is to interrupt this invisible battle. It's saying to yourself, I see what's going on, and I'm willing to move on anyway. Acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with everything, or that you don't feel pain. It just means that you have decided to stop fighting against what you cannot change. And in that act of surrender, there is an enormous peace. It's like dropping a heavy suitcase after a long trip. The Stoic does not deny reality, he adapts to it. He understands that there are things that are out of his control, and therefore he does not waste energy on what is out of his reach. Instead, it focuses on what can change: your look, your attitude, your future. Practices such as meditation, conscious breathing, and inner silence help in this process. They do not change the external situation, but they strengthen your internal world. And that's what matters, being firm on the inside, even if everything outside seems uncertain. Accepting is a turning point. This is when pain stops paralyzing us and begins to teach us. And when you make peace with what is, you make room for all that can be. Because true freedom begins when you decide to stop resisting reality. Stoicism teaches us that to love wisely is to know how to let go with respect. When someone walks away, the initial impulse may be to hold on tighter. But detachment doesn't mean coldness or disinterest. It's a form of deep respect, both for yourself and for the other. Being able to let someone go doesn't mean you've stopped loving. It means that you have understood that love should not be a prison. In Stoicism, practicing detachment is accepting that everything is transitory, including relationships, and that this does not diminish the value of what was experienced. Empathy remains, even when the bond changes. You can wish well, cheer for the happiness of the other, even from afar. You can respect his silence, even if you miss him. Such emotional maturity is rare and profoundly powerful. Healthy detachment frees you from the need to control the outcome. You don't need to know if the person will come back or if they still think about you. You just acknowledge that you've done what you could, and that now it's time to trust life and yourself. Practicing detachment is actually an act of self-love. It's saying, I respect myself enough not to beg for what doesn't come naturally. This does not mean closing one's heart. It just means not hurting yourself trying to hold on to what you don't want to be held onto. And when you learn to let go with empathy, something amazing happens. You open yourself up to new possibilities, new connections, and above all, a new kind of love, the one that starts within you often. When we are emotionally attached to someone, we begin to revolve around that person. Without realizing it, we leave our tastes, our habits, and even our goals aside. Stoicism reminds us that our essence is what makes us unique and magnetic. Moving away from someone can be a clear sign that we have disconnected from who we are. But the good news is that connection can be restored. Coming to oneself is a beautiful and powerful process. It's time to rediscover your hobbies, your values, your energy. Magnetic people are not those who try to please all the time, but those who have their own brilliance. The Stoic cultivates this with simple actions. He takes care of the mind, the body, the soul. Not to impress others, but to honor oneself. When you find your essence again, your presence changes. You express yourself with more authenticity, more confidence, more truth. And that, in itself, attracts, because nothing is more engaging than someone who is doing well in their own skin. Stoicism teaches that you don't need to seek external approval to feel valuable. Just be faithful to what you believe, to what moves you, to what makes your heart vibrate. Your magnetism is in living in line with your principles, not in trying to be what the other expects. So use this moment to reconnect. Feed your mind with good books, your soul with good times, and your body with care. The glow returns. And when he comes back, you realize that you never needed anyone to be complete. You just needed to remember who it was. Pain has two paths. Either it imprisons us, or it transforms us. Stoicism invites us to use it as a starting point for personal evolution. The question is no longer, why did this happen to me? But rather, what can I learn from this? This change in focus changes everything. Self-reflection is the act of turning inward with courage. Not to blame himself, but to understand himself. Ask yourself what patterns are repeating, what parts of you need more attention, and what this experience is trying to teach you. Transforming pain into purpose requires presence. Instead of being distracted by empty distractions or trying to numb suffering, the Stoic sits with the pain and listens. He knows that there is wisdom in discomfort, that the answers rarely come from noise, but almost always from silence. This practice is a powerful tool for self-knowledge. And the more you know yourself, the easier it is to avoid the same mistakes, build healthier relationships, and most of all, treat yourself with more compassion. Because real growth begins when we stop sabotaging ourselves. Pain, in this context, becomes a beacon. It shows where there is still fragility, where there is a lack of emotional structure. And instead of running away, you start building, brick by brick, with more awareness, more strength, and more purpose. Thus, pain ceases to be a burden and becomes fuel. The distance from the other, which once seemed like the end, now becomes a milestone. The exact moment when you chose to become a firmer, wiser, and more aligned version of yourself. In a relationship, it is common to let go of certain dreams to keep up with the pace of the other. But when that connection breaks, the chance arises for something rare, to look inside and ask, What do I really want? Stoicism values this return to the self, to the essential. Rediscovering your goals is not an exercise in selfishness, but in authenticity. It's remembering what made you vibrate in the first place. It is rescuing forgotten projects, shelved plans, wills left aside. And with that, regain the enthusiasm of living for something that is only yours. Stoic philosophy proposes that true happiness is born from a life that is aligned with your values. Not with what society expects or what the other wants, but with what really makes sense to you. This coherence is a source of lasting peace. By reconnecting with your goals, you also restore your identity. He begins to act with more direction, more focus, more passion. And this reflects in everything, in his mood, in his posture, in his presence. You return to your place in the world, firmly and lightly, writing down your goals, revising them, making small plans is an act of hope. It is declaring to the universe that despite the losses, you move forward with intention. And this attitude opens new doors, new paths, new possibilities. Authenticity is magnetic. When you live honestly with yourself without the need for masks, the connections that arise are more real. Because people who live with purpose inspire, and living with purpose is one of the central pillars of a Stoic spirit. We seek freedom in many ways, financial, emotional, geographical. But for Stoicism, the only true freedom is that which happens within us. It is the ability to live well, regardless of what is out of our control. To be free is not to depend on someone's mood to be at peace. It's not needing everything to be perfect to feel gratitude. It is to look inside and know that, despite the storms, there is a calm place that no one can invade. Your center. This emotional freedom is built gradually with conscious choices. Each time you choose self-control over impulsivity, each time you choose self-respect over the need to please, you free yourself a little more. The Stoic understands that loss does not take away his value, that someone's removal is not a certificate of failure, but a change of course, and that your happiness doesn't depend on who stays or goes, but on this vision transforms relationships. When you become free, your connections become lighter, more authentic. You stop demanding from the other what only you can offer yourself. And this creates a space where love can flourish without fear. In the end, to be free is not to be held hostage to one's own emotions. It's having mastery over yourself, even when the world around you seems out of control. And when you achieve that inner freedom, no loss is big enough to bring you down for good, because you'll always have yourself.